As a real estate broker, I deal with one of the most important assets in people's finances, but really the people who are successful are the ones who have more of a holistic approach and plan ahead to take advantage of opportunities and avoid pitfalls. Really excited to have today RetireUS CEO Michael Scarpati, who has a program that helps people achieve the financial freedom they deserve by putting a plan together and really kind of avoiding some of the common pitfalls. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Bill, thank you so much for having me.
So obviously there's a lot to your program, but let's just start from a simple spot. What's the one most common problem that people have that prevents them from achieving financial success that you aim to kind of get them on the right road on? What's the number one spot that people miss the most, do you think?
Most people are unconsciously incompetent when it comes to managing their finances, meaning they just don't know what they don't know. We've been taught a lot of things throughout our lives that aren't necessarily true any longer, and things have evolved dramatically in the space and the processes in which we can utilize to manage our own finances and build wealth. And so I think the biggest thing that we see is generally people are still kind of living in an older paradigm, aren't really caught up to how the industry works, all the things they have at their disposal at this point, and are just kind of missing things that they are just unaware of with their own personal approach.
So imagine you can deal with a whole population of people, but if I was to say, is your focus as a program on high net worth individuals, kind of the fat middle class, or the lower end who aren't getting resources at all, where would you say the focus of your clients are coming from today?
It tends to be in more the middle class. That's where we see a lot of people who are prioritizing their financial health and their future. However, because of the way some of the industry is structured, they're not necessarily able to access the highest quality of advice and guidance that's in their best interest. And so we've really built a program to kind of open up those lanes and give everybody a little bit more of a cost-effective, easy way to get guidance from the best professionals that are out there.
It seems like at the high end, there's so many resources available. There's just so much money involved, right? To those
Definitely.
few. And in the middle class, it seems like there's no education. People come out of high school and college with no understanding about basic budgeting or money. I deal in real estate, and the press used to be somewhat education focused. People had magazines and newspaper. Now it's just all clickbait articles, and I have a whole podcast on how most of it's just nonsense in the real estate space. And I know it's also true in the financial space as well. So talk about how much do you have to spend correcting misinformation versus actually putting in good fundamental foundations?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a really good call out. We're in the age of information, but in the sea of information, there's only a few drops of wisdom. That's kind of
I
the
like that.
reality that we live in right now. And there's two major reasons for it, in my opinion. The first is the institutional domination. So as you mentioned, the news, the main media channels, as we all are very well aware, I think at this point, are pretty much dominated by institutional finance. There's dominated by institutional money. And as a result, that messaging does tend to flow to the top. And so the financial industry, planning, investment management, is dominated by major institutions. The big ones that come to mind are the BlackRocks, the Fidelities, the Vanguards, the State Streets, right? These major institutions. And the reality that we need to all understand is that they are in the business of gaining more assets, right? More market share. It's actually not their business to legally give investment advice that is absolutely in your best interest. They have their own interests, and it's just something that we need to be aware of.
Right.
But there's a lot of financial incentive, for lack of a better word, that flows through the media channels to kind of prop up that messaging a little bit more. So you kind of get the standard stock, bond, mutual fund, these ETFs, whatever it may be.
Right.
And you kind of miss a lot of the meat in the middle that actually really helps people take things to the next level. And then on the other side of the coin, you have the dominance of platforms like TikTok, Instagram, where there's actually non-financial professionals giving a lot of financial guidance and advice, right? If you are a licensed professional, there are major compliance stipulations that you need to adhere to in order to be in the public square, giving any form of financial guidance, which is why most of the voices that are out there actually don't fit that criteria, because there's a lot of red tape. So you don't see a ton of licensed professionals actually using those platforms. Instead, it's people that are also kind of figuring out themselves, but they're coming across as an authority figure. So you kind of have this middle ground of information that's just never really in the zeitgeist because of these two polarities that kind of dominate the conversation.
Now you have to be a little nicer than I have to because of your nature of your job. But for me personally, I grew up when you had local banks, and whether it be a national bank's local branch or a local bank, they serve the community. You knew the branch manager or the president of the bank. They were part of your chamber of commerce. They were part of your little league team. Wells Fargo or the big banks, you'd walk in and you know the branch manager if you banked there for years. They care about customers. Now, you're not going to meet anybody without a 10-day advance notice at Wells Fargo. They're too busy literally stealing money from their own clients. They've been accused over and over again. JP Morgan, Wells Fargo paying multi-million-dollar settlements, stealing customers' money, yet it's impossible to get your own money out of there or without holds and such. And so I just think that these institutions have been completely turned upside down, and we have to look at what I would call non-traditional sources for information. It used to be you go to your banker and he would give you advice. It used to be you could walk into a local Dean Witter office and get stock and bond advice from somebody who was good. Not anymore. They're too focused. They've been squeezed for their commissions and they're trying to make money there. So I think you hit it right on the spot. So let's talk about then, now that we know there's misinformation, what are some of the good ideas? Like one of the things I try to tell people is, I don't care how tough it is, the American dream is possible. Now you might have to work harder. You might have to avoid more temptations. You might have to be smarter to get there. But anybody can make money, save money, build wealth, provide for their family, provide for legacy money. It's just you have to have a plan and execute that plan. So talk about maybe one or two key disciplines or behaviors that your program is designed to help augment or support the people maybe otherwise are missing.
Definitely, and I completely agree with you. Right, we are the masters of our future. Right, we have the ability to create wealth and abundance if it's something that we truly want. But the actions are the thing that is the most important. Right, we can dream about it all we want, but taking action is what actually helps us get there. The first major action is actually auditing where you're getting your advice from. Right, so like you said, there is a lot of information and misinformation out there. One of the things that you mentioned was used to be able to go into the bank and get your advice and feel like it was trustworthy advice. They were going to operate in your best interest because there was this community human component to it. Right. The reality is nowadays that is actually the minority in the financial services space. So about 85% of licensed financial professionals have no fiduciary duty over their clients, meaning 85% of the advice that's out there does not, in the eyes of the law, have to be in the best interest of the client, right? It actually can serve the institution.
That's a big, I had no idea it was that bad.
That
85% of licensed professionals?
85% of licensed financial professionals are non-fiduciary. Yeah.
Which means
crazy.
They do not have to legally have your, they might say they do, and they might have your interest at heart if they're a good person, but the temptation is just overwhelming for most of them.
Yeah, and part of it too is the scope in which they also can operate, right? So if you're a licensed financial professional, but you work for the institution, right? You don't work for the client, realistically, right? Who cuts the check? You get a W-2 from the big institution. If that institution is really truly in the business of just gathering assets to their own funds, that's where the advice is going to be driven. And it's the nature of the way the industry has evolved, or, you could probably make the argument it's devolved over, the past few decades. And unfortunately, most people, especially in that middle class, are getting investment advice and getting financial planning advice from professionals that are either one, limited in scope, or two, just don't necessarily need to put them first. And so that's the big thing that we're solving with the platform. With the platform, we are creating a lane for you to work with trusted fiduciaries without the major asset minimums, right? That's one of the big roadblocks is you need typically $500,000, $1 million to work with the product-based fiduciaries. Otherwise, they're not going to take a call with you. It's just, again, limited amount of professionals out there. They get paid the same amount, or it takes them the same amount of time to work with someone that has $100,000 that has $1 million, except they're going to get paid 10 times more to work with that person that has $1 million because it's a percentage-based AUM relationship. So they move up market and they leave the middle class behind. The only other way you can work with an independent fiduciary is flat fee out of pocket. They kind of cover a different scope of work. They're more planners. They're doing process, building systems. They're not managing money. They cost $5-10 grand a year on retainer. And so the middle class has been completely left behind by this high quality, trustworthy advice. And the RetireUS platform creates that access. No asset minimums, no high fees. We offer, simple subscriptions to get you access to that highest tier of trustworthy advice. And the tech just makes it incredibly easy to do that from essentially anywhere in the world.
I was a manager of it was a reverse IPO. It wasn't an IPO, but we bought a stock shell of a company basically. And at the time, we were approached by Morgan Stanley, and my stock on paper is worth about $5 million. And they said, we will advance you or give you a line of credit for half of it on a no recourse basis if we agreed to put all our retirement programs in Morgan Stanley, which meant that all our employees are going to have these lousy 401k programs in their mutual funds that they're going to overcharge customers and just rape our employees forever. And as tempting as at the time, about $2.5 million was, and it was very tempting. So I can't build a business if all my employees are being ripped off. It made no sense to me at all. And subsequently, the whole thing fell apart, and the stock has become a nice tax deduction over the last few years. But my point is, that's where most people's finance decisions are made by somebody else for their benefit. And you can't. If you're in that game, you're playing. It's like going to the casino trying to win money for your retirement or for your life. You can't win. The odds are already stacked against you. That's why they build casinos. That's why they build these stock companies, because they make money in these games that the average consumer can't win. So let's talk a little bit about once you have the advice and you have, let's say, high quality advice that you can't otherwise reach because they're now in your platform. What are the types of things they have access to or decisions they would make as a result that they might not otherwise do if they were on their own or stuck with a fiduciary, a non-fiduciary selling them stock that's not really appropriate?
First of all, that's a great story that you gave, and it peels the curtain back a little bit in terms of like, this is actually how these deals are made and how the tentacles get further and deeper into our everyday life. And the benefits advisor is such a good example of this kind of next component of where we're kind of taking the conversation. There's 3 different types of financial professionals you can work with, and they all take a different approach really to giving you guidance and advice. The workplace benefits advisor tends to be all around that 401k or thrift savings plan or whatever the workplace benefits or investment options are, and they focus on timelines. So they're actually really focused on 30 years of service, age 65, year 2030. That's where the guidance is really driven. It's a single point in time, and then the advice is all kind of revolving around that point in time. And that's one approach to this. The second approach is really a goal-based approach. And this is where you get the second type of professional, which is the product professional. This is what dominates the industry. This is generally what people think about when they think financial advisor. It's the money manager, the stockbroker, and they're taking a goal-focused approach, right? So it's goals where it's hey, I have this $100,000. The goal is for it to grow. I want it to grow at 6 or 7%. And they go, okay, well, we can put it in, X amount of stocks, bonds, mutual funds, build you a portfolio, and we're going to go look to achieve that financial goal for you. And then the third type is the systems professional. These are the planners. And so there's a big difference between a financial planner and an investment advisor. The planner is focusing on process. How do all the different components of your financial life, your cash flow, how does that impact your retirement, your short-term goals, your cash reserves, your taxes, your insurances, how is all that balled together to make sure you're managing risk appropriately, those things. And then at the end of the day, the more successful you are with those key areas, how's it all going to impact the legacy plan, right? The planner is putting together the roadmap, or they're the architect in this process. And with the platform, what we're doing is we're actually connecting you with two types of fiduciary professionals. One is actually a planner. It's a certified financial planner who is a fiduciary, and they're going to build you out the system first, right? Any investments that we choose should be the result of a much bigger picture, from a bigger system, a bigger plan. The product should always fit into the plan. Most people miss that step, right? They go directly to the advisor that's managing money, and they're starting with products, right? They're starting with purely just the money they have and the intention for growing that money, versus how does that component fit into the bigger picture, right? So we start with planning. That's actually the major difference in terms of process and action. Is you're going to work with two different professionals. One is going to be an absolute expert on building you the game plan, right? Building out the strategy of how the household should be making decisions, making financial decisions. From there, then we're going to connect with the product professional. We're going to connect the dots with the products and figure out, all right, based off of all these variables and moving components, let's take now the money that we have and fit the right products into the plan, so that we have something that is complete, comprehensive fiduciary advice from soup to nuts.
When somebody works through your system and follows up on the plan, is the money invested with the RetireUS account, or do you guys have your own mutual funds and investments, or are you working with a platform like an LPL or Schwab or one of those kind of on a wholesale basis?
That's such a good question. So we are a platform company. We are not an investment advisor. So we're connecting users with independent fiduciaries from all sorts of institutions that are operating in that independent fiduciary space. So when you're in the independent fiduciary space, you have what's called an open architecture, meaning you're not tied to any specific institutions. You can vet the entire marketplace and build, products, portfolios, whatever that may be, that directly fit the needs of the customer. And so we're actually the glue, right? We're the core between those relationships, and we make it really simple and easy. We vet the professionals so that you don't have to spend a ton of time finding trustworthy advice, and you can kind of get right into the work about how you're going to take, where you are today to the next level.
One of the things that prompted me to launch this podcast as a real estate agent was the lack of people having anything of a plan. And so inevitably somebody passes and this property has to be passed down. And particularly in California and other states, that can be a very difficult legal process, expensive, time consuming, or worse. And with even a modest estate plan would start off with in many cases, a trust, to where you avoid probate and that transfer gets done. Does the idea of establishing those types of legal entities and trusts and other maybe more complicated, are those on the table? Are those things that you refer out to, or you have people on your platform? And how does that work on your platform?
It's definitely, it's always on the table. What we do with the platform is we tier the subscriptions based off of objective. And so if you are really focused on legacy, if that's something that you're ready to approach, those connections are things that we will facilitate as well, in terms of connecting you with the professionals that draft those documents, if it's an attorney, or set up those trusts. The big thing that we want to always kind of be aware of is for people, it's not a one size fits all solution in terms of what is the priority now for a lot of folks, and what they're ready to, or what the readiness level in approaching these topics. That is in 15 years in this business, what I found to be kind of the biggest thing for people to really taking action is the overwhelm factor, right? Is it just feels like swallowing the entire ocean, and trying to kind of piece it together step by step is really what we found to help people at least kind of get out of their own way to get started and to start putting a plan together. And it kind of becomes infectious. Once you get started, if you've ever gone down this path, once you kind of peel back one layer and start to see the importance of putting a plan in place for, say, cash flow, or putting a plan in place for retirement, it kind of starts to steamroll or snowball into the importance of some of these other than now legal documents that actually reinforce and protect the family or protect yourself. And so it's definitely something that we approach for all people, not necessarily because not all people are ready for it, but we pride ourselves in being really kind of like the quarterback for people's financial life and connecting them with the professionals that can support them in all ways to help that become kind of a reality, manifest the reality they want.
So somebody's looking to start a plan and get started with you. Not that we're going to do a whole demo on it, but at RetireUS, everybody's always happy on these websites. like that. But you have a starting financial assessment that they, at least on the website, says takes about 15 minutes. And so this begins kind of down the path of you inputting imagined information, and then along the way, you're going to help identify what those issues are. Talk a little bit about what's the planning process look like when somebody establishes an account and starts uploading their information to your service.
It's incredibly simple the way that we've set this up. So the first step is this assessment. It's actually, the assessment itself only takes about 4 minutes. So it's very quick and user friendly. And what it's doing is it's essentially running analysis on your savings behavior, your goals, your approach, your psychological approach to money currently. And it's pulling out different, we call them red flags. And so these are the blind spots. When I mentioned earlier, kind of unconsciously incompetent, this is the we don't know what we don't know. And what the tool does is it's going to give you some analysis on your progress towards your goals, so retirement pacing, tax planning, and the risk of failing at those goals. But then it's going to pull out these red flags. And that helps us really understand where are the immediate areas where we should really be focusing our attention. The red flags are the urgent positions that we need to address if we really want to be able to move forward in a way that is as safe as possible, if you will, and as wise as possible. And so that helps kind of understand what tier that the user should really fall in, where should they start. So there's 3 tiers: basic planning, tax mastery, wealth mastery. And depending on where you are now, really depends on where your starting point should be. Once you select that subscription, our onboarding wizard is self-start onboarding wizard. It takes about 10 minutes or so for you to complete your profile. From there, you're easily matched with your professional and you get started.
Fantastic. Well, and then, so let's talk about, from a business point of view, how long has RetireUS been around, and kind of what have you done so far, and what are your plans over the next couple of years? Where do you see this going to?
So RetireUS came from a legacy financial planning practice, is the way that it started. So the financial planning practice started about 15 years ago, and RetireUS really was birthed out of the shift we saw during COVID. So once all of a sudden everything went virtual, financial services, financial planning, the industry itself, because of a lot of the regulatory hurdles, is very slow to adopt technology. There's just a lot of red tape in order to do things that other industries are just kind of the norm. That there was still up until 2020, there was still a lot of, paper hand-signed applications that were just the standard. And so it's very, very slow to adopt technology. We really felt the pain of that in 2020 when everything went virtual, because this was still very much a business that you needed to sit at the kitchen table with the prospects or with the clients in order for people to feel confident and comfortable making decisions, right? It was a very human, high touch, in-person type of an industry. And as things went virtual, it was very clear that something was missing, that still maintained that human element to the virtual process. And how can we make this still feel personal and connected? And we started to we couldn't find any tech out there. And so we started to kind of build our own version of that. And in 2022, we were able to bring that first iteration to market. So RetireUS was kind of birthed out of all this other experience that we felt firsthand in the financial planning space. and has now, continued to grow and get its footing, where we can offer this lane of access to, multiple independent fiduciaries through the platform itself. And so the real updates, where we're headed, is creating more and more scalability. When we get to the core of the issue that we're solving, is fiduciary advice right now is not very scalable. That's the problem, right? Like I said, it takes the same amount of time to work with someone that has $100,000 or $1 million. The financial professional is in a business. They're in the business of making money. They want to help people, but they're also in the business of making money. They are going to make that decision 10 times out of 10 to work with the $1 million user instead of the $100,000 user. And what we've been able to create with the platform is more scalability. Generally, on average, it takes about 35 hours per year for an advisor to onboard and bring on one new client. That's how much of their time is essentially required.
Wow.
And with the tech, what we've been able to do is streamline that and get that down to about 10 total hours right now. So from 35 hours to about 10 total hours. Where we see that going is getting that down to about 3 total hours, with advancements in generative AI, with agentic AI, and just with improvements on workflow automation, that we can create a much more scalable ecosystem environment for advisors, fiduciary advisors, to plug in and see many more households at scale. And so what that does is it lowers the barrier. Now we don't need to only limit, right? If we can see 10, 15 times as many customers, right? And it doesn't make the lift any heavier. Financial professionals are in the business of, they want to help as many families as they can, but the way the industry is structured, they are definitely limited on their ability to do that and earn high income. And so what the platform is really doing is creating this ecosystem of fiduciary scalability. And over the next, I would say 6 to 12 months, we're going to see some really, really major advancements in the tech roadmap that we have for the platform, to be able to open this up to more and more advisors and RIAs.
Seems to me that not only can you make it more technology efficient for the planner providing service to customers, but you also can, once they've created the advice, that advice can be used to multiple people that fit certain similar characteristics, right? If you have 1,000, if you have 10,000 clients, that means 1,000 types. The same advice for one can go to 10 each. Now you've made your advice 10 times more usable or more. And so it seems that the technology creates opportunity, I think, for both ways, both the provider be more efficient, and then once you've done something, it's more valuable to go back to your customer base with, to resell kind of the same advice over and over again, or similar packages of information.
Yeah, what it comes down to, there's always going to be a very personal element to every single person that is coming through the platform and is working with a professional. But at the core, there's frameworks, right? There are frameworks that we're putting together that are data-driven frameworks based off of a ton of different data points about the person themselves, that we can at least build out very comprehensive, personalized systems that fit them, because of the data that we've gathered over the past 15 years in this business, and how we understand, like you said, there's just certain personas and there's certain key milestones and areas that people are planning for, that can at least check off 2 or 3 or 4 different specific key frameworks that will benefit them, that will put them in a position to have really good process towards building the wealth. And then the investment advice, like I said, that the products should be always separate from that, right? And so that's where this other piece comes in. That's going to always be something that's directly related to the person that you're talking to. But how does it fit into those bigger frameworks is the question. And you're kind of hitting the nail on the head. So we can create a lot of scalability by approaching it from the systems perspective, but it also just reduces friction, right? A lot of people don't do this because they just don't feel like it. Right? It feels too much. It feels like too much work. And objectively, they're right? Historically, we did a ton of market research. On average, to work with an independent fiduciary, it takes 3 to 5 weeks of time for somebody to gather all the data necessary and get it into a position where they can have an actual data-driven meeting, right? A personalized data-driven meeting with a financial professional. That's the average turnaround time because of the heavy lift, right? It just takes a lot of time. There's a lot of manual entry, a lot of paperwork and things that need to be tracked down. And we've already dramatically been able to streamline that for the user, right? Within 10 to 15 minutes, we can onboard all the data that we need to get started and have a data-driven analysis goal planning meeting with an investment professional within, a week's time versus this 3 to 5 week traditional timeline that the industry is used to. So we're really also working on breaking down as many barriers that stand in the way of the consumer to just get started in this process. And that's just going to continue to improve with the tech roadmap as well.
It's interesting. I recently changed bookkeepers and I use QuickBooks for my business. So everything's connected. So bring a new bookkeeper, you just add them access and they can see the banks, lines of credit, credit cards, savings, all the activity, the past years, the tax information. It's all there as soon as I give them access. On a personal level, I've been looking, there just doesn't seem to be the same kind of opportunity. And so that's really where you're coming in, is trying to put all that together to make it easier for the customer to share information without, how do you shop to 3 advisors? Are you going to give that information, upload to 3 different platforms? I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Yep, exactly. I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head. And these are the reasons why people don't move, right? It's just, and it's the nature of the industry for sure. Tech is slow in personal finance because FINRA and the SEC, they just require a lot of, they're just a little antiquated in their approach to, I think, being able to trust the fact that we have technological advancements now that can keep data safe and share it with, institution to advisor to our own personal dashboard without major security risks anymore. Like the tech is there to do this stuff. No question. And that's exactly what we're here to accomplish.
There's no question that tech existed. Internet 1.0, 15 years ago, there were programs you could put all your financial information, your banking, your savings, your checking, your institutions, your credit cards, and you could see it all in one dashboard. And that doesn't even exist anymore today, I don't believe. I mean, the companies have their own individual version, but it's company specific. It's not agnostic. And the advantage of being agnostic is you can share it if you want to, or you have it all in one place. You don't have to change banks and lose all that information or re-upload it. So I imagine you're looking for users at RetireUS, but I imagine you're also looking to reach out to providers of services. So talk about that process. How do you get people who are interested in participating as an advisor or as a resource to your platform as well?
So right now the big focus is more on the user base because there's still a lot of education that needs to happen for people to understand the major differences in where they're getting their financial advice. And so that's kind of the major focus right now. There's already just a ton of interest on the advisor side, and how can there not be if we can bring in new clients for them and scale their business easily? It's kind of a pretty easy sale. So the real challenge that we face, if you wanted to call it that, is educating the public right now. Like that's the big mission, is getting people to understand the major differences between the trusted guidance that they can receive through a platform like RetireUS and the non-fiduciary sea of people that are out there soliciting financial advice, and the major differences and the major, value adds or the impact that is made is different, man. It's just a very, very different approach that you receive when you work with somebody that has an open architecture, that's building systems and is working from that fiduciary perspective with a comprehensive, holistic view of your finances. It makes a major difference because there's so much nuance in how we can approach our finances. There's so many little things that compounded over time make a major difference. When it's where we're saving, the types of accounts, the tax ramifications, right? The levels of risk, the consistency of our returns, or the way that we can eliminate unnecessary downside risk in the markets, which we know we can't control, right? We can't control the markets, but we control our exposure to risks. And people just are missing a lot. And so I think that right now, as long as we can continue to get the message out, I encourage the public to just educate themselves at least on, if they're thinking about financial professionals and getting some guidance, start to really educate yourself on just the different types and how it works. RetireUS can be a good resource for you. We have a free program. We call it mindfulness. It's all about understanding your current situation and really, also educating yourself on, how things works and things that that you should be aware of.
Well, Michael, I think it's a compelling, opportunity enough that while we're talking, I actually opened up the account and started playing with it, which I'm not supposed to do when I'm doing a podcast. But I do think I fit in kind of the fat middle of where you guys are trying to be, where I have enough to worry about. I don't have enough to throw it away, and I don't have enough to have people lined up to give me good advice. I get a lot of. I'm in the middle of that ocean of misinformation, trying to figure out where to go. So I'm going to play with it a little bit and see how it works. And I think I appreciate at least a chance to learn about your program. Michael Scarpati is the CEO of RetireUS, and the website is retire.us.com. Very easy, fast so far on your website. I appreciate that. Michael, thanks so much for your time today. Continued success and good luck with your program, and maybe we'll check back in a few months and see if there's any major developments then, okay?
Thank you so much, Bill. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you. And that was Estate Planning Weekly. We get together a week and talk about estate planning. Usually we're talking to attorneys who do the plans. I'm a real estate broker, and that's obviously who I work with regularly. But at the same time, I have customers who come into money either through inheritances and or through self-property and need to do something and step up their game on their planning. So hopefully you found this helpful today. I know I did, and I'm actually going to check out the website, open an account already. If I can help in any way, please reach out at Bill Gross Probate on social media. As always, make today your best day.